Folks, I know it's been a while, but I'm back with Buckeye Sports Breakdown in a new house, but the same old teams. Once again, going down the line with MLB and MLS as we talk about the Reds and Guardians, fresh off facing each other at Great American Ballpark, and what to expect from them this weekend, and also with the MLS teams as they get back into action after an early bounce from the League's Cup. Hello everyone, I'm Yahirson Hassan and welcome back to this show about teams from the great state of Ohio. We've got a lot of quick hits and a lot of action to get to, so without further ado, let's get to it. And we start off in Mason, Ohio, where the Western and Southern Open is taking place. One of the build-ups to the U.S. Open in terms of ATP and WTA tennis. The quarterfinals are going on today. Quite a lot of action. Of course, the number one in the world, Carlos Alcaraz, is playing. He played earlier today, beat Max Purcell. Novak Djokovic will be your nightcap for tonight. On the women's side, a lot of great players as well. Sabalenka and Jabeur, to name a few. It's a lot of great action and a lot of great joy for the people in Mason, for the people hosting this event. I know I haven't been in a while. It's been about 5 to 6 years since I've gone, but it's always electric and it's always a joy to be there. And that too, I mean, the fact that this could be a ticking time bomb. People don't talk about this enough, but the fact that the Western and Southern Open could be moving to Charlotte in 2026. They've already got the plans out. It hasn't been signed yet, but the fact that they've talked about it, that this move could be made in the coming years, 3 years from now to be exact, kind of shows what it means for Mason to have that right now, what it means for the greater Cincinnati area to host that tournament, and what it means to have it for this time right now. All right, next up, Joe Mixon found not guilty in his court case where he was allegedly, or originally was allegedly charged with murdering someone, or at least being in a little bit of a scuffle. He was found not guilty, which is a very good thing, both for Joe Mixon himself, a man who has gotten into a bunch of legal trouble before, especially during his time at Oklahoma, but especially for the Bengals as well. I mean, you're already looking at a team that could be without Joe Burrow in week one. The fact that Mixon could have been out. Samaje Perine has left the team. You're almost playing Trevion Williams if Joe Mixon doesn't win this case. I mean, we're legitimately talking about that. So that's a very good sign for the Bengals, a very good sign for Joe Mixon as he tries to right his life slowly but surely. And the NBA schedule has been released. The Cavs have got their schedule dropped, obviously. They start off their season on October 25th on the road at the Barclays Center against the Brooklyn Nets. That includes an interesting schedule, including hosting the reigning champs, the Denver Nuggets, on November 9th, and a trip to Paris to face the Nets on January 11th. I don't know if I'll get tickets for that. The flights from Phoenix to Paris right now are about $750 round trip. I have a lot of money. I don't have that kind of money. I'm sorry. All right, so on to the baseball teams. We're kind of going to go back and forth today because the Reds and Guardians both played in the Battle of Ohio. So it'll essentially be one big chunk. We're going to start off with the playoff picture for both teams. And we'll start off with the Reds. They're 2 games behind the division leader, the Brewers, in the hunt for the final wild card spot. Currently, the Marlins have it. And right beneath the Marlins in this hunt are the Reds and the Cubs, who are both tied at a .516 when it comes to their overall win percentage. Again, the Cubs have played less games than the Reds, so basically what ESPN has done is just clink them all together and just call it as it is. Guardians, middle of the wild card hunt. Middle as in like they're in the middle of the pack upon the teams in general. That includes teams like the Royals and A's, who are presumably eliminated at this point. But back in the middle of the wild card hunt, but 4.5 games behind the Twins, and that could go down to 5. They're currently losing to the Tigers right now in the first game of their doubleheader till today. So they could go down. Who knows? They could come back and essentially be up. On to the Reds. They had a weekend series over the Pirates. They won 9-2 in the first game. Andrew Abbott on the mound for that. Saturday's game was postponed, so that led to a doubleheader on Sunday. The first game at around 1:10 Eastern time was lost 4-2, and they were leading late, and then the Pirates were able to rally, which, again, not a good thing. But they were able to win the second game 6-5, and the opposite ended up happening. They were down about 5-3 or 5-4, and then they're able to tie it, and then they're able to get the win in the extra innings. And it's a good confidence boost. Ended up being their first series win since the Dodgers back in late July. That too, Dodgers on the road. But let's start off with that one loss. Pitching was late, it wasn't pretty. Alex Young ended up getting the losing pitcher designation. So again, not a good situation for the Reds. And again, for a guy like Alex Young, usually not a guy to lose trust in that kind of situation. I mean, I feel like, again, this is probably just from my bias from watching the team, but it feels like when we look at how the Reds play, it always seems like it's maybe Buck Farmer or maybe Lucas Sims who loses it in the moment, not a guy like Alex Young, which I thought was a little concerning at the time. But overall, when you back it up with how you did later that day, when you beat the Pirates and able to travel back home that night with the W, it ended up being pretty good overall. So again, overall, really good. And I think the other thing is the starters are playing well. They're playing really good offense. But the one thing that's trickling in the back of my mind, which I'm not as confident about now as I was in July, and it's the fact of our team starting to figure out the Reds. Now, their pitching crew has always been a little bit subpar this year, but I'm talking about the offense, right? Ellie De La Cruz, solid player. He's still getting the home runs when needed, but not much of a flash. Matt McLain, you could say the same thing about him. I mean, you still had some great players showing up. Stuart Fairchild has started to get some big plays, had some great RBIs in the second win against Pittsburgh, had that inside of the park home run against the Marlins. And yet you feel like with such this rally Reds, this mantra with the team, you have so many things poking out to say they're not good enough. It feels like they're lacking something, or they had it, but now they don't, because it's got to be consistent throughout, right? And maybe it happened when they played the Cubs, right? And the Cubs were the hottest team, and maybe the confidence started to dwindle, right? You lose to the Cubs in that series, you lose to the Nationals, then you lose to the Marlins. And then you're thinking, great, we've lost 3 straight series. You had a 6-game losing streak in between, which included only 1 win in 9 games. Not a good sign for this Reds team, but they're starting to get back. And I think that's what they need down the field. That's what they need down the line. On to the Battle of Ohio. It was a split for the Reds and the Guardians. The Guards took the first game 3-0. The Reds took the second game 7-2. We'll talk about the first game first, and we'll, again, start off with the Reds. Not a good look for a side that is well known off their offense. Now, don't get me wrong. It was a very good battle on the mound. Graham Ashcraft was out there for the Reds. I forget who was out there for the Guardians. I want to say Shane Bieber, but I don't know. Either way, I mean, it's what you expect in a Battle of Ohio type rivalry. Someone down the stretch who can really show it. It was actually Allen for the Guardians. Again, they had a few changes over time, including Seivale going to the Rays. So obviously this is a new look Guardians team when it comes to the rotation. But they were able to show out. Allen did a great job pitching. And Ashcraft, I mean, had some trouble. 7 innings pitched. Granted, that's still pretty good. 7 hits, 3 earned runs. But this is what I'm thinking about for the Reds. And I think it shows you, well, one, it shows you how the Guardians play, right? Allen had 6 innings pitched, only 4 hits allowed, 7 strikeouts. And then you get Clase in the 9th, and he's able to finish off the deal. And when I look at that and I look at how the Reds have played, you see a little bit of a discourse, right? You want the offense to do something, right? If the Reds are, I mean, I've looked on TikTok. I mean, you can look at Ask Kate, you can look at anybody, and you can say to yourself that if the Reds are making the playoffs, it is off their offense. Let's be honest. When that offense doesn't show up, that's a loss, right? That's the reason why offense wins games. Championships, let's see. But that's what the Reds need in that kind of situation. And that's the one where I think you have to show yourself. And you maybe need to look yourself in the mirror and just find one play. And that's what ended up happening on Tuesday. 7-2. It was tied 1-all. It was a shot all the way to center field. TJ Friedl's running back catches it at the wall to deny what would have been a 2-run home run for the Guardians. And then it was all Reds. 7-2. They end up winning the game. They show their command. They show their power. And they show themselves in what is a very, very close wild card race this year that they can be a team. They can be scrappy. I mean, Barry Larkin talked about it on the broadcast. And again, I think a lot of the commentators for the Reds have talked about this team starting to find wins in different ways. And again, obviously, you want the offense, you want the flashiness, but I think they're onto something here because in June, when you're facing the Royals, when they're facing the Astros, when they face the Dodgers, I mean, they were all wins, don't get me wrong. But you think about it, it was all the same rally slash flashy Reds that ended up happening, right? Excuse me. It was all those rally Reds, right? It was just chipping away at the Dodgers, getting a couple walk-offs. The Royals, I mean, shoot, Ricky Karcher on the mound, I mean, had probably the most chaotic appearance I've ever seen from a pitcher, let alone a Reds pitcher this year. That was crazy. I'm not going to say what he said, but that was crazy. And that's what I want to see from the Reds going forward. And maybe it's kind of a refreshing thing when you get a win like that against the Guardians because it shows you, well, you got against the Guardians. Build it up going forward, right? I mean, for the Reds, and we'll talk about it later. You got the Blue Jays at home this weekend, AL wildcard contender. Angels on the road. I mean, not so much of an AL wildcard contender, but I mean, Shohei Ohtani speaks for himself. And then D-backs on the road, kind of sort of an NL wildcard contender, although they've started to fall off as well. And that's what I want to see. Then, again, for the Guardians too, you have to take a look at yourself. Obviously, don't get me wrong. 1-1 is good against a team like the Cincinnati Reds, who at home, yes, are below 500, but when they've been good, oh boy, they've been good. And you have to take a look at their schedule too. And this is the thing with the Guardians. Like, yes, you're down 4.5, maybe now 5 against the Twins, but that schedule though for the Guardians, an absolute uphill battle. Really, only 3 series left in the year are, to be honest with you, only 3 series left are against teams that are not playoff contenders. It's against the Royals, against the Tigers, and against the Angels, all of which are on the road. So it shows you that you're still going to have an uphill battle. You got the Tigers this weekend. Dodgers come to town on the weekday. They go into Toronto to play the Blue Jays next weekend. Then you got the Twins on the road, Rays at home over the Labor Day weekend, Twins at home, Angels on the road for a 4-game series, Giants on the road, Rangers at home, Royals on the road, Orioles at home, Reds at home, Tigers on the road. Pretty simple. Pretty simple if you ask me. I mean, just look at this. You have the Orioles, who could be the number 1 seed in the AL, in general. The same could be said for the Rangers. The Rays could end up being the AL East champions. You got wild cards with the Blue Jays. You got the Dodgers, who could be the 2nd seed in the National League. Like, this is a very tried and true schedule for the Guardians. And I think, yes, like, it's very hard. And once we get to those series, we'll talk about like the implications between competitiveness and getting results, because they're going to be 2 different things, and how Terry Francona can look at that squad from a different perspective. But at the same time, though, you have to consider yourself and say 1-1 on the road in Cincinnati. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. And now you got to go forward. Speaking of forward, we'll get to the Guardians next. We'll start off with the Reds. Blue Jays at home, but more importantly, a couple of pitching things going on. Hunter Green is back in the rotation for the first time in about 2 to 3 months. And again, Hunter Green has had an interesting season. And when I say interesting, it has a more negative connotation because it's been injury-ridden. It's been plagued with giving up big home runs. We haven't seen the Hunter Green that we saw last year. I'll be the first to say that. But it gives you hope that when you have a guy that's been out for so long, he has that leadership. He has the talent within himself. You understand from a Reds perspective, maybe we've got a chance. You can say to yourself, yes, people like Ask Kate are saying our pitching crew is horrible. Our pitching crew is going to keep us out of the playoffs. Many media members, TikTok, ESPN, YouTube, what have you, are saying that. But you pay Hunter Green $100 million in a contract for a reason, right? He's got to show it right there. So he'll be back. That will be on Sunday. Will be his first start back in a while. That being said, Luke Weaver is out. Luke Weaver is no longer a Red in free agency. And again, I think, in my opinion, like when you look at the guys who showed up that were not Hunter Green. Obviously, you have Graham Ashcraft, you have Andrew Abbott, but in the regular rotation, it was between Luke Weaver and Brandon Williamson. And I think Luke Weaver played solid. He got better since his starts in June, where it felt like he was giving up a bunch of runs, and somehow the Reds kept up and played a bunch of runs to win those games, right? Think about that Braves game where Ellie hit for the cycle. That being said, he got better, but not too better. Not Brandon Williamson better, who basically utilized his pitches, utilized it to kind of paint the corners, to really stifle the defense, or rather stifle the batters. And at the same time, it shows you what this team can do. And I think I'm more confident, like if you think about a 4-game pitching crew, like a hypothetical one, you have Green, you have Ashcraft, you have Abbott. Williamson looks like a solid 4th pitcher, and I'm starting to feel it that way too. And I think a lot of Reds Nation would agree with me on that. But again, Luke Weaver, great pitcher. We appreciate what he did in Cincinnati. Now, looking at the series against the Blue Jays, overall, solid competition, but they need to start trusting themselves at home. I don't get the fact that this team at some point during the year, like in May, was like 7-15 or something like that. And now they have an over 500 record on the road. And yet they're still below 500 at home. And again, you can say, well, they lost to the Marlins in here. They got swept at home by the Nationals. But still, though, you've got to look yourself in the mirror and say, we can't be this bad at home. We can't be this bad if we want to make the playoffs. And you've got to get some sort of energy going forward. And it starts off this weekend, because you have a road trip that could very much make or break your season, where you've got the Angels on the road. Again, Shohei Ohtani, no questions asked. D-backs on the road, another team that started the year off hot and has, I think, had more of a fizzling out than the Reds have. And then the Giants on the road, which actually might be the series of the year, knowing the Giants are also fighting for a wild card. 3 really big series. And if you have that sort of confidence that if you can take a game, at the very least a game, I think is pretty solid. If you take 2 games, then you're talking. Then you can say to yourself, all right, we can go to LA, we can go to San Francisco, we can go to Arizona and win those games where it matters. Because that's what it starts off. It starts off this weekend, and it's a build back going forward. Not to mention, after the Giants series, they're back home. Guess who they're facing in that one game? The Cubs, who they are tied with for a wild card spot. So, or rather, on the outside of a wild card spot. So very, very, very big afterwards. All right, on to the Guardians now. They've got the Tigers at home. Let me do a little check of the phone. Again, as I mentioned earlier, they had an interesting match. They had an interesting game today against the Tigers. Let me check what the final score is of that. I think that game has ended. Yes, it did. So the Tigers won 4-2. Guardians are 5 games behind in that schedule. And again, not a good way to start it off, but the same question needs to be asked about this team that I asked about the Reds. Show some command at home. Like, I know you get rid of Cy Bale. I know you get some cap space off of that, but still, like, in the present moment, do I like what this team has seen? I don't know. And they've been slipping for a while. They haven't lost the command that they had going into the All-Star break. Remember, they were in charge of the AL Central. It was very close between them and the Twins. And then it all just slipped away like a moment in time. They need to win this series. They need to win this series badly. They need to get a win tonight, tomorrow, Sunday, if they want to do something, because as I mentioned before, that schedule gets pretty rough in a little while. So a very special guy had a birthday last week, and I'm talking about FC Cincinnati. He's turning 8 years old, and it's been a great 8 years. But you know what his belated birthday present is going to be? The biggest week in the club's history. Sunday, on the road at Lower.com Field in Columbus for another Hell is Real matchup, the second of this year. But that's not all. On Wednesday, Lionel Messi, the greatest soccer player of our generation, and Inter Miami are coming to TQL Stadium for the semifinal of the U.S. Open Cup. There are a lot of things going on, a lot of ups and downs in FC Cincinnati's season, in Columbus and Miami season, in MLS in general, and it all is being wrapped around the orange and blue, the best team in MLS this weekend. Now, the biggest question is, can they keep that title and can they show that title off on display this coming week? Welcome back to Buckeye Sports Breakdown. I'm Ahirson Hassan, and thanks for tuning in for what is going to be a monumental week for FC Cincinnati, and again for Columbus Crew as well, as they host the Hell is Real matchup, the second one of this year, and exactly 3 months after the first matchup at TQL Stadium, where FC Cincinnati won 3-2. Let's recap Leagues Cup for both the two teams. They were kicked out in the round of 32 on penalty kicks. FC Cincinnati to the finalist Nashville. It was 1-1 at the end of regulation, and Nashville won 5-4 on penalties. Columbus Crew was knocked out by Minnesota United. It was 3-3 at the end of regulation, and they lost 4-3 on penalty kicks. Updates in terms of the transfer portal. Again, it's been a while since we've talked, so a lot of updates. None for FC Cincinnati, other than the fact that Aaron Bupenza has made his debut. It's more in-depth now. We know he's a part of the squad, and he's doing quite fantastic for the team. Columbus, on the other hand, many, and probably the biggest shock I think I got in the trade deadline is Lucas Zelarayan, the number 10, the captain for this team, is out. Yes, he's heading over to Saudi Arabia, breaking in the big money over there, much like a lot of the star players in Europe. And then coming in is Diego Rossi and Julian Gressel. Again, Diego Rossi, the former LAFC player, returning to the MLS after a stint in South America, and Julian Gressel coming over from Vancouver Whitecaps as he heads over from the Pacific Northwest to the Buckeye State. My thoughts on it are basically simple. Again, I'm very shocked that Lucas Zelarayan got booted. And I would probably say, I mean, other than the fact of maybe giving Diego Rossi a DP spot, which, again, I don't really comprehend, other than the fact of maybe Wilfried Nancy trying to go to a 4-3-3 rather than a 4-4-2 or a 4-2-3-1, that's really the only thing I can comprehend is basically in a 4-3-3. You're either playing Zelarayan as a 10 or you're playing him out on the wing, which is rather unusual, right? And maybe he wants Diego Rossi in, you play Christian Ramirez in the center, and then you play Cucho Hernandez on the right, or you find a mixture amongst all of those three players. That's really it, in my opinion. Julian Gressel, I think, is another great pickup, and it actually gives a little bit of depth to the winger spot. I mean, obviously, we talk about Yaya Boa, we talk about Max Arston. Julian Gressel has, I think, a lot more experience playing on that right wing, and especially, I think with Zelarayan out, they can really show their talent where you have a right wing back or a right back where Gressel can kind of slide in and be that kind of spot. So again, a little bit confusing, but I think that makes more sense and more reasoning to me than Diego Rossi. So on the match in general, again, going back to what we saw in May from TQL Stadium, FC Cincinnati, in my opinion, needs to find Bupenza and Vasquez in some open spaces. Simply put, that's the thing. That's a full squad this time. No Dominique Badji trying to slide in. So it's very good. And the fact that Lucho Acosta carried that team, right? He got a goal. There was another one where he basically just had a great dribble into the box and fed it in towards Badji or whoever. And then there was another one, the game winner, where basically he was pressuring in the box, got it back, laid it off towards Junior Moreno, who finished it. He carried FC Cincinnati in that game. And I feel like he's got to show up. But my biggest question is, how much does Columbus man mark, right? They're going to try to double team him. They're going to understand Acosta will want to try to play direct. They're going to try to force him back and try to play with long balls forward or long balls crossing into the box. That's what Acosta may need to do, or rather, he'll have to do it because of Columbus's pressure, especially with guys like Aiden Morris and Darlington Nagbe in the middle. That's for FC Cincinnati. Columbus, I think they need to find Rossi and Gressel. You have those guys. Rossi kind of playing towards up top, Gressel down the wings, and I feel like that's going to be an interesting battle. Julian Gressel on the right, Alvaro Barrial on the left. Alvaro Barrial, that is for Cincinnati. They need to find some dynamic plays where they can find Cucho and they can find Christian Ramirez. And I think in some ways they can pretend to be more of a two-striker system where both of them are kind of playing a number 9/poacher role. Because we saw this from Cucho last year, we saw it from Christian Ramirez when he played at Minnesota United, that both of those guys, when they try to flourish well, it is in that spot. And I think that's Wilfred Nancy's thinking, is when you get those two guys in a position where they can get some space going forward when it matters, that's what shows the world, that's what shows MLS what Columbus can do best. And don't get me wrong, you've got a lot of great options there. And I think the other fact of the matter because of it is FC Cincinnati struggled with this against Sporting Kansas City. They struggled marking a little bit. Remember, they allowed 2 early goals in that match because of those situations, because SKC went down the line when they were going out to the wings and crossing it in, and easy balls into the box, easy shots into the back of the net. That's the kind of situation where I think Columbus will try to utilize that sort of space and that sort of time to try to get a result and perhaps beat Cincinnati. So once again, we saw little updates over time. Let's do a little tail of the tape between these two Ohio soccer teams. Starting off with goalkeeper. Again, FC Cincinnati went with Alec Can for the Leagues Cup matches since it was non-MLS play. They're back with Roman Celentano, presumably. I'm going to take Celentano over Patrick Schulte. Again, Schulte has done good with making saves, but Celentano feels like he has more experience, or at least, even if he doesn't. I mean, to be honest with you, both these guys are young. Both of them are under 25. But at the same time, Celentano understands spacing well. He understands how to play well. He has a great relationship with the defenders. He's all you can ask when it comes to a great goalkeeper. Probably, I'd say, top 5 or at the very least top 10 when it comes to MLS. That's FC Cincinnati. Patrick Schulte, again, great. It's just a little bit young. And of course, there's that fine line between young and inexperienced. And sometimes Schulte tends to cross over. We saw that a few times during Leagues Cup. Defenders. Now, obviously, I think if you look at center backs, obviously FC Cincinnati, Nick Hagglund, Yerso Mosquera, Matt Miazga. I mean, Mosquera having experience with Colombia. Miazga having experience with the U.S. men's national team and was part of their Gold Cup squad. Nick Hagglund has been a very solid guy as well. This is a team that looks well defensively. I mean, if you point to the reason why FC Cincinnati is in the place they are at, yes, it's because of their offense, but their offense was there last year, right? But the problem is that teams are no longer scoring against FC Cincinnati late because of their defense. And that's the reason why they're the best team in MLS right now. It's because of their defense. And you got it. The center backs included. Wing backs, I think, make it better. You've got Alvis Powell or Ray Gaddis on the right. Alvaro Barrial, in my opinion, probably the best left back or left wing back in MLS right now on the left. It's a great pairing overall. Give me FC Cincinnati. Midfield. This is an interesting comparison. I mean, you look at the holding midfielders, you look at the attacking midfielders, you look at how there could be a change in formation. I'm still going to go Columbus on this one. I mean, you still have Aiden Morris and Darlington Nagbe going forward. And I think because of the departure of Zeller Ryan, I think Aiden Morris has, I think, more liberty to be a number 8 on the ball to really show his caliber, right? He's another young player, which at times has looked well, but hasn't really been in a very much contributing role, either as a playmaker as a 10 or either deep lying as a 6. And now it really gives place for Darlington Nagbe to be a 6. Again, I think both guys could be interchangeable, but it really shows when you have players who can play 6 and 8, they can be dynamic towards the box, not to mention their wingers on the right and left. I mean, obviously you can make the saying that Julian Gressel is more of a right back than a right wing back because he played right midfielder at Atlanta, and because I feel like that's his strong spot. I'm still going to count him in that midfielder role because he's still a guy going up in the attack, right? He's still a guy going forward that at his heart is a midfielder, right? And again, we'll see how his track back in abilities is. It was pretty solid when he was at Vancouver, but that should be a good battle. That should be a good battle, especially comparing like apples to apples with Gressel on the right, Barrial on the left. That might be the best matchup in the match over there. Forwards, now, if you were to tell me in May, I would have probably gone with Columbus, but I'm going to say a tie here. And I think this is where, as I said before, Aaron Booth Penza, in my opinion, might be the make or break on whether or not FC Cincinnati gets a result from this, because he's the new piece to the puzzle, right? No disrespect to Dominique Badji, but when you get a guy like Aaron Bupenza from Gabon for $7 million off a DP deal, you expect him to show up in a moment like this, and I feel like that could happen. That will happen in a moment when you get FC Cincinnati going forward. So that's it for Hell is Real. On to the U.S. Open Cup semifinal against Miami. To my knowledge, that match will be on Wednesday. Let me check. It will be at Wednesday, August 23rd at 7 p.m. Eastern from TQL Stadium. And again, in my opinion, this is a popcorn type matchup. It is FC Cincinnati, on paper, the best team in MLS, against Inter Miami, who has been the best team in MLS over the past month, ever since they've got the one and only Lionel Messi. How has Messi changed this team, you ask? Well, in many ways. One, you get a player that can score and can almost provide a different dimension. Yes, he can score. And this is a team that has Joseph Martinez and Leo Campana, but that's one thing. He can score. I think the other thing is that Lionel Messi not only just makes himself score, and he can take players one-on-one, he has the leg to shoot from long distance. He makes his teammates better. And that's the thing with Miami I've seen that really makes me scared. Bernardo Cramashi, I mean, he was a rookie brought on. He was trying to find himself in the game. Throughout the entirety of Leagues Cup, he's looked like a great midfielder. Robert Taylor, he has not played well this entire year. And now he looks like a top 10, top 15 player in MLS because Lionel Messi is on the pitch. He's finding Messi in open space. Messi returns it back, and they all continue. And Joseph Martinez, too. I mean, this is not the Joseph Martinez we saw in Atlanta back in 2018. He needs some help to try to win those games. And again, I think some of it also goes to the fact that the play in MLS has gotten better over the past 5 years. You get Lionel Messi in the mix. Everybody on that team looks better with Lionel Messi on the pitch, right? It's almost like it's better, but it's seamless, right? This is a Lionel Messi that at times is walking on the pitch, but as Taylor Twellman put it, he's still seeing the game as it is. He's not just lollygaggling around. He's watching the game like a hawk. He's a student of the game. He has been for the past 15 to 20 years since he's been playing professionally, and he will. He will. And that's where it's interesting. That's where it's different. Now, the biggest question is, how can FC Cincinnati stop him? Yes, Messi has not been perfect in MLS. Yes, Dallas got a point off of Miami. Ended up losing on the penalty shootout, but if the game ends at 90 minutes, Dallas gets a result. That's still a happy result for them. There's so many questions. However, 4 goals Miami scored against Dallas. 4 goals Miami scored against Philadelphia Union. I'm getting a little concerned when you look at the defense, because this is a defense that has maybe not been so peculiarly straight since maybe Gold Cup time. And with that extra time off, you think about it, you have 2 weeks off. I mean, that Nashville loss was a little while back. So arguably you have 2 weeks off before you get the Hell is Real matchup, and then you've got Inter Miami at home in the U.S. Open Cup semifinals. And that's the one thing. You have to look at that defense and say to yourself, how do you stop Messi in space? And more importantly, how do you mark yourself where even if you're triple teaming Messi, how do you stop the other guys, right? How do you stop Taylor? How do you stop Kramashki? How do you stop Martinez? And it's the overall spacing there, because that's what may decide it overall. That's one. 2, I've seen this with many other teams, if you will, before, right? You look at Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick was a great head coach in the NFL, but the one clique in the league that he would just stumble upon every time would be teams that are coached by either one of his former players or one of his former coaches, because they understand. They understand who he is. They understand how he teaches. They understand how to bequeath that information to their players. And because of that, Bill Belichick has always had a tough time in deciphering that information, right? Even when he had the likes of Tom Brady and Julian Edelman on that team. I bring that up because FC Cincinnati has 2 Argentinians, Lucho Acosta, Alvaro Barreal, with Acosta being the captain. He knows how Messi was. He and Messi are good friends. Lucho Acosta was at the World Cup last year, and he was also holding the trophy. They know how to be together. They're good friends. They know each other. But how much does that impact Lucho? How much does that impact FC Cincinnati to say, all right, I know Messi, I know what he likes, but I also know what he dislikes. And that's the one thing where I feel like that might be a one-up for Acosta and FC Cincinnati, is if you can get some Argentinian flair. Acosta can run the midfield. You've got Barrial going down the right against DeAndre Yedlin, which, again, I think should be a really, really good matchup. Now you're starting to look to yourself and say, can you get something going? Now, obviously, you've got some great goalkeepers. And again, it could come down to a situation where Messi is lining up for a free kick. Philadelphia had Andre Blake. Dallas has Matt Pius. Both of them really great goalkeepers. You got Roman Celentano, who I think could also play a pretty solid role in a match like this, right? Defense wins championships. FC Cincinnati is 90 minutes away from their first ever final. Let that sink in. They're 90 minutes away from their first final in their 8 years of history. It has never happened before. This is the biggest game, and now it's even bigger because you got Lionel Messi lining up on the other side, right? The defense wins championships, right? It's very big. So now, this is a legacy building game for both sides. This might be the match of the year for MLS. What would the legacy of this game be for FC Cincinnati, for Inter Miami, for MLS this season, for MLS in the history of this league? Yes, I will go that far. I'm going to start off with FC Cincinnati first. And for me, it's the fact that this is the Cinderella season for FC Cincinnati. Pat Noonan understood when he came in. Of course, he was a student of Jim Curtin in Philadelphia. So he knew that going to a supporters shield, being a high-class team was possible. And Pat Noonan has showed it this year, right? He took FC Cincinnati, who had gotten the wooden spoon for 3 consecutive years, got them to the playoffs in his first year, and he responds with sending them, in right now, a pretty favorable lead for the supporters shield. Very, very good, right? If you win this game for FC Cincinnati, it shows a couple of things. One, it shows you this season was quite special, right? And it goes beyond just winning supporters shield, right? Obviously, LAFC won the Supporters Shield and won the MLS Cup, but that's not something that's happened a lot. I mean, in my 6-7 years of watching MLS, only twice have I seen the Supporters Shield winner make the final. That was Toronto in 2017 and LAFC in 2022, and that's it. If FC Cincinnati can make a final this year, beat Messi, which, I mean, honestly, unto itself might be a final, and then either beat RSL or Houston, that can really show that Pat Noonan, one, can make Cincinnati a title town once again and show people that this is not a fad. This is not the Cincinnati that we've seen before. This is a Cincinnati that can really hunker down and show people what they've got at the right moment. And especially in a stadium, which, fingers crossed, will be majority FC Cincinnati fans. I mean, the Bailey will probably put a statement out, or it's probably heard already, that no Argentina jerseys will be allowed in the Bailey, and I hope I do not see anything on a broadcast. Speaking of which, I will actually be doing a live react for that game right here on YouTube. But yeah, I swear, do not show up to Cincinnati with a Lionel Messi jersey on your back, whether it be Inter Miami or Argentina, because you know the whole city of Cincinnati is going against him this week. Understand, Lionel Messi is the villain, not the hero in that town, all right? That's good. For Inter Miami, this is a big game for them too. Obviously, you've got the Leagues Cup final, but even if you, regardless of what we see from them in Nashville on Saturday, the fact that you are so close to winning a title, and I bring that up obviously because Inter Miami is the worst team in MLS right now, arguably, right? If you're looking at the MLS standings, you got the best team against the worst team in MLS. Obviously, that has been changed because of our recent developments. If you look at the type of play Miami has, it screams championship, right? It screams dynasty. And if they win Leagues Cup on Saturday, you have a chance to build on that and essentially, in the blink of an eye, change all momentum on the season to be Lionel Messi's homecoming party. And if you don't, then you realize then it's maybe a breather for the other, what is it, 27, 28 teams in MLS where you can say to yourself, we're good. We can win a title. We can beat Lionel Messi. Because that's what it comes down to. I mean, if FC Cincinnati can deny Miami a title, taking them out in that moment, I mean, them and Nashville, if both of them can do it, then we realize Inter Miami and Messi are not aliens. They're human. They're human just like the rest of us. And it shows they can be something down the line. And for Miami, well, it will take them a little while. It will show themselves, and David Beckham and Jorge Mas will realize there are going to have to be some growing pains. There's going to have to be a little bit of changes here and there if Inter Miami is going to be a team that is going to be dynastic down the stretch. MLS this season kind of goes off the point that I said earlier about Miami, is the fact that if Miami gets the Leagues Cup final on Saturday and they beat FC Cincinnati, you've got the final. Now, if RSL beats Houston, then the final will be in Salt Lake. If Houston beats RSL, the final will be in Miami. You're basically showing yourself, if you're MLS, that this will be the season that it goes as planned, ... and then something happened. And we know something happened when a 5'7" Argentinian from Rosario, Argentina, walked in with the number 10 on his back. That's what ended up happening. That's what would end up happening if Miami wins this game and they go on to win the US Open Cup, and if they win the Leagues Cup. This is a very big week for MLS in general, because it will show you when people look at this season, 25, 30 years down the line, they will say this is the summer that we turned Messi, right? This is the summer that we all hopped on board and said, Lionel Messi is the greatest player on earth, and we see why. However, if it doesn't, then you realize, yes, they're good. Miami is a very good team, but they're not dynastic. They're not dynastic now. They've got to wait for a little while if it shows. And it shows for the history of the league too, which I think is another thing. Like, yes, you have a player like Lionel Messi. And again, people 25, 30 years down the line could be saying, well, it could have been MLS in the retirement league. Messi was 36 years old. He could have had something. I don't care. Anybody who has been watching Inter Miami's games has seen what Lionel Messi has done to that squad. Single-handedly has changed the perspective of that team. You look at the history of the league and you'll say, well, they were close. They came close. They showed their bearings down the line, but it wasn't an instant impact. It shows, I think from my perspective, it actually shows the caliber of MLS, right? Lionel Messi is a great player. He's back in a situation where he can be the star player in a city that he loves with his family, where everything is happy, and yet MLS can still prevail. Everybody in MLS other than Messi can prevail. It shows the competition of MLS, right? You think about David Beckham, LA Galaxy, kind of a full circle moment for him, obviously. But he came in 2007. He didn't win an MLS Cup. Well, 2009, they made the MLS Cup, and they lost to Real Salt Lake. It wasn't until 2011 that they won MLS Cup, right? I can check that. But it wasn't until 2011. Yeah, it wasn't until 2011. 4 years into his time at LA Galaxy was when David Beckham had it. And again, you could argue, well, David Beckham doesn't have the Lionel Messi effect. And sure, you could definitely say it. But at the same time, it shows you how big LA Galaxy was at that time. I mean, this is a team that also had Landon Donovan, who probably up until David Beckham came in was arguably one of the best, if not the best players in MLS at the moment. And then you have David Beckham come in, and yet they still struggle. It shows you that teams prevail. Teams have the sense of belonging. They have the mentality going forward that something can happen, right? It's the same mentality that pushes the Seattle Sounders team in 2016 from dead last all the way to a 4th seed, all the way to an MLS Cup title. It's a type of potency that sends so many teams on runs to the MLS Cup final, and you can win it as a 3 seed, as a 4 seed, as a 5 seed, and you can have your moment in the sun, even when a regular season doesn't go in your favor. That's what's on the line for MLS. Because yes, FC Cincinnati is that first seed. Yes, FC Cincinnati is a runaway Supporters Shield winner, but it certainly does not feel like that. The number one team in MLS right now is Inter Miami. And the way this can stop it, the way this game can stop it, the way this week can stop it with both the Leagues Cup final and the Open Cup semifinal can show, is this league truly a tried and true league where anything goes? So that's it for Buckeye Sports Breakdown. Again, talking about MLB, talking about MLS. Oh boy, we got a lot of interesting games this weekend. Cincinnati, Columbus, Cleveland. Watch out because we've got a lot to talk about coming next week about all the games we've seen. Hey, how about next week too? College football's back. So tune into Buckeye Sports Breakdown. We'll be back every week with different activities, different talks, different conversations about teams and sports from the great state of Ohio. And we're just getting started as we start off the new school year. I'm Mahir Hassan. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next week. And as always, stay safe.